Okay, so real briefly, we're going to talk about points, lines, and planes. I do have another video on the website that goes through points, lines, and planes and talks about their dimensions, but we will touch base with that real quick. So a point is, you may know it, it's just like a little dot. Now, we can make a really big point, which is just a really big dot. In either case, points have zero dimensions. They don't have any width or any length. We only make this dot so that we can see them. But technically speaking, points don't have any thickness, depth, or whatever. Lines, however, lines do. Lines have one dimension. They're straight. So here, no matter which direction I'm going, it's only going in one direction. And that's a line. Now, a plane, notice the trend here, right? So a point has a point has zero dimensions, a line has one dimension, and a plane has two dimensions. So a plane is nothing more than if we took a line like this, and then we dragged it out in the other dimension, just like so. And so that's a plane. So points we think of as zero dimensions, and we label them with capital letters. So this would be point A. Lines, this is actually a line segment. This is connected by the points A and B, so we label it as such. So again, this is a line segment, which means that it ends. So I write it like this, with the two endpoints, A and B. If I had a line, which means it goes on forever, it's the same notation except I put these little arrows on the end of the line segment. Now, if I had a third point on here, C, and in fact, there are actually an infinite amount of points on this line. But if I had a third point here that I labeled point C, I would not write this as line ACB. Lines are only labeled with two capital letters, 2 points. So this is the correct way to label that. Now, plane has those two dimensions. You may recognize a graph with an x and a y axis. That's a plane. We label planes with capital letters, so fancy letters. So if I say this is plane D, I might write it like this, as a cursive D. The important thing is that you look at labeling points and lines correctly. Planes aren't terribly important for the purposes of this class. However, do know that points and lines are capital letters. This is not the same thing as a lowercase letter. In fact, later on when we talk about triangles, you're actually going to see that we sometimes call sides lowercase letters. And that's fine, and that's perfectly acceptable. So in order to avoid confusion between points and lines, points are always capital letters. Now we have these two words down here, collinear and coplanar. Collinear just means that there are 2 points that are on the line. So if I have some line, let's say I got these 2 lines intersecting, and I have a couple of points on here. So we'll call that A, we'll call this B, we'll call this C, and we'll call this point D. We would say that A, B, and C are collinear because they are on the same line. Also, B and D are collinear because they are also on the same line. But A and D are not collinear because they are not on the same line. So make sure that you understand that collinear means that they are on the same line. Just as coplanar means that points are on the same plane. So, not the best drawing, but here's a plane. And so I have a point here, A, and I have a point here, B. These 2 points are coplanar. However, let's say I have another point down here. If I have point C is not coplanar to point B or point A because they're not on the same plane. Now, if I put another point here, D, you can see that D, just like on the edge of a waterfall, is on the same plane as A and B. So it's coplanar to A and B, and also on the same plane as C, because it's on the same plane, so it's coplanar to C. So, make sure you understand what these 2 words mean and the significance of collinear and coplanar. Naming points, lines, and planes, we just went over this. So again, if I have a point, it's a capital letter. Lines are 2 capital letters because they are representative of 2 endpoints. And planes get a capital letter with a cursive letter, a fancy letter. So if you see any fancy typed letters, that is a plane. And space, space is 3-dimensional. So those were all 2-dimensional objects. So if I have, like a cube here, it's a very, very, very poorly drawn cube. Let me try that again. There we go. This is a cube, and it has 3 dimensions. So imagine inside this cube, I have some points that are just floating around. These are in 3-dimensional space. They're collinear if I draw a line between any of these, and they're coplanar if I draw a plane between any of them. But as things stand right now, there is no visible line, there is no visible plane. They're just freely floating in space. And that's 3 dimensions. For the purposes of this class, we're really going to stick with 2 dimensions and specifically with points and lines. So do make sure that you are comfortable with labeling and naming points and lines.